There. Okay, a little farther in.
She became my partner.
Yeah.
All right, we want to welcome you all to our second half of our history of past and present. My name is Jodi Palmer. I am a director of the Utah Midwives Organization, a member of the board over regional representatives. So if you're interested in being a regional rep, or you want to get better connected with the midwives in your area, I'm the gal that can support you. And I also am a midwives at the Midwives College of Utah. I almost did that, which is history. It's part of history. So the Utah College of Midwifery was the original school. We'll get to that in a minute. In Utah, founded by Diane Bjarnson, it was eventually changed to the Midwives College of Utah. And so that's where I'm midwifing midwives today, and which gives me my particular passion in being part of the group that you're experiencing today. So the student arm of the Utah Midwives Organization is brand new. And Anna and I happened to be having a conversation one day about the culture of midwifery in Utah and new student midwives, new midwives, and how we could just conversating about how could we support each other in a more effective, productive way rather than reinventing the wheel every time you start your practice or feeling so isolated. And that was the genesis of the student arm of the UMO. And that arm's about, I don't know, a year old now, maybe not quite so long, 6 months? 6 months. Yeah, 6 months. And so we are now holding what are called Rising Midwives events. And this is one of our Rising Midwives events, and hosted by the student arm of the UMO. And what's particularly exciting about this group is it's your opportunity as new midwives, as seasoned midwives who can mentor other students, and those of you who are students to begin consciously creating your own community of midwifery in Utah. But this is the opportunity to begin thinking about, what do I want it to feel like to practice in Utah? What do I want it to feel like for students and new midwives who are going to be coming after me? And how can I support that culture? And that's what this group is all about. And Anna's going to tell you more about specifically how that group works and the opportunities you have to get involved at the end. So today at this Rising Midwives event, we're really excited to have heard from Victoria. Thank you, Victoria, for your contribution.
You're welcome.
And to hear an incredible panel of midwives who have really left a legacy in Utah. In fact, I've had the great opportunity to have a personal relationship with all 3 of these women. All 3 of them have mentored me in very significant ways. So I'm happy to introduce them tonight. Diane Bjarnson. Diane began midwifery in the 1970s and has always been happy to share her knowledge and help train others. She founded the Midwives College of Utah in 1980 and has been part of training countless students over the years. She still runs her practice, Sunstone Maternity, with her daughter and some former apprentices. Many local midwives purchase her excellent herbal remedies from the business, Sunstone Formulas. And Diane was a preceptor of mine way back in my precepting days. And my favorite story of Diane is, as a very brand new midwife, I'd been studying a lot, and suddenly one day at a birth, she said, "Jodi, I want you to go get some gloves on." So I got my gloves on, and then suddenly she placed me right in front of a birthing woman. And everything I knew, everything I had dutifully studied, that flew out of my head. And I did not know what to do. I absolutely did not know what to do. And Diane literally took her hands and put them on my hands and guided me through that process of catching a baby, which has actually impacted the way I midwife midwives and the way I mentor and coach my own practice, and has had a significant impact on my life. And I think is probably the most beautiful story that I hold about what does it actually look like being to midwife and midwife. Suzanne Smith. Suzanne was the first midwife to open a birth suite in Utah and went on to open 4 more better birth locations before she successfully retired in 2018.
And she's loving retirement.
That's great. It's not like you've stopped. That's for sure.
Practice long enough to retire. It's great.
She played a critical role in the state licensure option for both midwives and birth centers. Her innovative fetal heart rate training for midwives is now available for CEU credit at, and we have a link which is on the UMO-Student Arm Facebook page. So if you want to take that class, please access that link. And she's helped to train hundreds of students throughout her career and continues to serve with hewing. Is that right?
Yeah,
you saying it correct?
Hewing.
Yeah. So I hope you're going to talk about hewing. And my personal story with Suzanne is I became the president of the Midwives College of Utah, I don't know, 16, 17 years ago. And at that time, it was literally in a broom closet. Probably the broom closet of your office.
And there was something else in the drawer.
Yes, and so every time I would go into the school and just feel the weight of that responsibility and what my particular role was at the school of helping us move into the next phase, training midwives nationally, was pretty heavy. And there were times when I would come out and sit in Suzanne's office and cry. I would really cry. And Suzanne was there to midwife me through that heavy responsibility. She guided me through many questions, things I just didn't know how to do or how to manage. She believed in me and she supported me and she gave me the courage to move forward. And Kristi Young. Kristi has served Midwives College of Utah as president since 2006. Kristi came right after me. And under her direction, the school has achieved NEEC accreditation and federal funding, allowing underprivileged aspiring midwives to pursue a formal education and become full-fledged midwives. She's heavily involved in midwifery on a national level through her work with NEEC and USMF. Not currently in practice, her focus now is on bringing up the next generation of doulas and midwives and increasing equity in midwifery education. And Kristi's heard this story before, and there's way better stories, seriously, about our relationship with Kristi, but this is the funniest one. So I was the president of the Midwives College of Utah, and I was looking for who would take my place because I needed to make a shift in my life. And so I invited Kristi to come and interview with me. And of course, prior to interviewing, I knew Kristi's history and felt somewhat intimidated by her and hadn't ever met her before. And so I've been doing a lot of research and preparing for a meeting. And I'm a very oral person and was chewing on my pen as I was preparing for this meeting. And so we meet, and I'm like going on and smiling, and Kristi, in her most gracious way, said, "You have a little bit of ink on your lip." And I said, "Well, excuse me," and I went to the bathroom, and actually that wasn't true. What was true was that my whole mouth was actually blue. Like my teeth, everything was blue. And she was so gracious, she never mentioned me again. And we had this beautiful meeting, and I think that's a beautiful story of what reflects the core of her soul and her spirit, and her graciousness and her care for really supporting others in doing the best they can. So thank you for that graciousness, Kristi. So what we're going to be doing now is we have some prepared questions for our panel that we're going to start with. So those of you who have questions, I hope you'll take a minute to jot them down so that we can ask them at the end. Also, just to let you know, Suzanne's prepared a really fantastic PowerPoint on the history of legislation in Utah, which included just a brief timeline of the history of midwifery in Utah, and that's found on the back table. So if you want to grab it, be sure that you do it. So without further ado, let's start asking some questions for our panel. So the first question we have for each of you, and the way that we're gonna do this is time you. And Anna, do you mind if we use your phone just as a timer? Because we want to make sure we can get through as many questions as possible. And I think we'll go with 2 minutes, and we'll see how that goes. If you feel like I cannot answer this question in 2 minutes, then we'll expand. But let's go with that. So the first question we have is, can you describe to us your background of training How did you get trained, and who did you train under? And let's start with Kristi.
I assume as a midwife.
As a midwife. Thank you. That's true.
A wife, a daughter, a midwife. I trained under Lorene. So she was my preceptor for all of the years. I think I precepted with her for 6 years. And that was before I didn't even know about the school, Diane's school at that time. I lived in Salt Lake. Diane was in Utah County. But I heard Lorene talking a lot about these midwives in Utah County. Then we had these midwives in Salt Lake County. And there was actually quite a bit of division. But I trained with Lorene for all 6 years and a little bit with Rayanne Peck. So those were my preceptors. And at the same time, I was a childbirth educator and had started the doula organization here in Utah. So those 3 things were kind of all meshing together. And I would spend every Tuesday all day long at Lorene's house for prenatal day. And if I had a young child, we got to bring our young children, and they played in her kitchen area while we did prenatals in the front bedroom. So that's how I trained. And CPM designation wasn't around then. So I think my last year of practicing as a midwife, the CPM designation became a reality. So I trained illegally, I practiced illegally, which made my husband really nervous. And when I lived in Salt Lake County, I felt like I had a really good backup system. A lot of the same backup doctors Diane used, or Lorene used, I had used. And when I moved to Utah County to Alpine, I felt less supported and more nervous about driving over Point of the Mountain, et cetera, et cetera. And so eventually that pressure kind of became part of why I stopped practicing as a midwife. So I've been really committed to getting rid of that pressure for future midwives.
All right. Anna, do you want to just let them manage the timer so it doesn't feel quite
Well, except for the part where it
scary?
goes out.
You can just wait that.
Okay. Or you can use one of your phones. If it doesn't feel like, how much time do we have?
Oh, so they can actually see it.
Just tell us.
Okay.
I mean, I'm fine with that.
Okay,
So
fantastic.
it's your story, Suzanne.
So I was very fortunate. I didn't know there was a midwifery school. I was working at Word Perfect, and we were hiring a new person, and they knew about it. So my boss said, "Oh, you're gonna love this new person." She told me about the school, and my little ears perked up, and that's how I discovered Dianne and the Utah School of Midwifery at the time. And I started on a lark. I just thought, well, that would be really interesting. And I can do it while I'm working at Word Perfect. So I'll just do it until I don't want to do it anymore. Figuring that I would lose interest, fade out, as many of my hobbies. And that didn't actually happen. So I started classes with Dianne and some of the other instructors that she had. Most of my apprenticeship was with Dianne and with a midwife named Kathy O'Brien. You know her.
She's still
She is. She's not practicing. She's retired also, but she is still around. And Dianne was very instrumental in the fact that she had started this school. I don't know where we would be right now. Dianne had not devoted herself to this school that she started. But I was there, and at some point she just said, "Suzanne, I want you to go take this new NARM test that they're doing." So I actually took the NARM the very first year it was offered because Dianne told me to. And then I had to take it again because, the first rev of anything is not considered any good after a couple of years. So I actually had to take it twice because I had taken too early of a version. But eventually I started my practice and did my thing, and I've always been grateful to Dianne for allowing me to do that.
Perfect.
Well, when I started out, there wasn't any MANA or NARM or any midwifery protocols or whatever. I got interested in it because I did a home birth, okay, and a week after I had Agatha at the hot springs in Hurricane, Utah. Polly Block came down and gave a lecture in the bank, and she talked about midwifery, and it was hush hush because at that time it was, we can't let anyone really know about this, okay, and we have to keep quiet. But when I went to that meeting, it became very clear to me that I needed to be involved in this. And we moved up to Utah Valley, and I took classes from, Polly was teaching a class. I just really couldn't grasp what a cervix was. I mean, I don't think she explained it very well. But anyway, I took the class from her, and then there was a group that was taking ACHI classes, Association of Childbirth at Home, out of California, and I read a bunch of medical textbooks, okay, etc., and worked through all their stuff and worked with the ladies there. I went to the Payson Hospital and took an EMT course to become an EMT. I took some other classes. I took one class from that naturopath that I can't remember his name about Homebirth. So I did everything I possibly could. And I felt at the end that that was really inadequate. That midwives should have more training. So that's how I got into education. We ought to get going and do something about it and help midwives become more educated.
Okay, the next question is, was there a pivotal mentoring experience that you received as a student or in midwife? Pivotal mentoring.
Well, like Diane said, we kind of cobbled our education together. We would go to anything we could get our hands on, and it was really unstructured, and we didn't necessarily realize the gaps in our learning until we were right in the middle of a birth. And so that's the beautiful thing about having, more structure that most of you have the opportunity to participate in. But I remember probably the pivotal experience that turned me on to midwifery in the first place was, and some of you have heard this story, so I apologize, but my third birth, my big deal in this hospital birth was, I don't want an episiotomy. Please, I'd like an intact perineum. So my OB agreed to that, and then he was in Hawaii on vacation. So his partner, who was catching the baby, said, I don't know how to do a birth with an intact perineum. And this cute blonde, who was my nurse, raised her hand and said, I do, because I'm up at the U studying to become a CNM. So I will help you, Dr. I can't remember his name, Dr. Brown, I think, hatch this baby over an intact perineum. And that was Dianne Williams, who started, was part of FHP's freestanding birth center, etc. And after that birth, she said to me, I think you'd make a great childbirth educator. I'd love to have you become a childbirth educator and come and teach for us at the birth center. And that was really the beginning of this whole journey, was her speaking up and saying, I can teach you how to do that. And of course, that's where I fell in love with midwives. My next 3 births were home births. So that was kind of the beginning spark. One person having the courage to have a voice, and can you imagine? Most midwives or most nurses, she was a nurse at the time, not even finished with midwifery school, wouldn't dare speak up and say, hey, I can show you how to do that. Well, I think it's because she was so cute that he let her do it.
I hope it's not just about her looks.
Well, I kind of think it kind of was.
I think we need to give,
but
there aren't very many physicians who would
do that.
Who would allow
yeah.
them.
Yeah.
who would have listened. And so
Right.
it sounds to me like we should give him a little credit.
I was really impressed. So that was a pivotal moment because that was the beginning of this whole journey. And she mentored myself and Tammy Pugh and Kim Smith, who also became a big part of the Homebirth world, as childbirth educators so that she could have a good education program at that first freestanding birth center, the FHP birth center.
Suzanne.
So I could not think of a really pivotal mentoring experience. I'm sure I had many, but my brain fails me. So what I'd like to do is reserve my 2 minutes for question number 3, because I have a lot to say on that.
Well, I'll tell you something.
Oh, all right.
I will never forget at the birth where she delivered a very hard shoulder dystocia, and she was so excited. You should see the grin on her face from one side to the other. It was incredible. Am I supposed to?
Yes, so a pivotal mentoring experience.
Okay. I actually started practice with 25 birth experience. 7 of them were my own children. Okay. And I had been mentored by Rana Camp when she came into Utah and was working with her, but we had a disagreement. And I, at that time, went down to California to a seminar from Maternity at Luz, gave one down in Los Angeles, okay? And I went to it, and the other midwives that were there, they were actually practicing. I wasn't practicing yet. They were practicing, but they were young midwives and so forth. And they had all these questions, and I could have answered most of the questions for them. And I thought, oh, well, maybe
Maybe I'm all right.
maybe it's okay. I know I'm supposed to do this. So I had, it gave me the courage to come back to Utah, and with my friend Cindy Holland, she had actually caught a baby before, okay? We started practice, and of course, the first lady that I delivered, she needed to be sutured, okay? And I had seen Rana do it a few times, okay? But didn't have any training in it, and I sewed her up. Of course, I am a seamstress. I know how to sew. I sewed her up, and you know, I checked on her later, and man, I'll tell you, it looked really good. So it gave me confidence.
They say if you put two sides of the perineum in the same room together, they'll heal fine.
All right, our next question is about legacy. What is the legacy that you have brought to Midwifery Utah, or anything that you set out to create or improve within the midwifery community?
In Utah.
Mm-hmm. And this is a big question, so feel free to take one.
You want to go first? Since you have 10 minutes.
I will
I
try
gotta
to.
do a little bit.
I'll try to
I don't know why you have to
pare it
think.
down.
It doesn't have to be.
All right. I'm giving you 5.
All right, so I was actually very purposeful when I became a midwife. I probably within the first 2 or 3 years, I had 8 goals that I wanted to see happen in the midwifery world. And it was always part of my thinking as I went along that I wanted to do something about these 8 things. So the first one was the legality. I didn't realize how illegal I was when I first started. I was a felon. I was not a convicted felon, thankfully, but I was a felon. And when it became clear to me that I was a felon, I knew that I had been called to do something about the legal situation of midwives. That was just unacceptable. As part of that, I discovered that many of the things that we were doing were illegal was using devices like Dopplers, suturing was illegal, any sort of pharmaceuticals like lidocaine for numbing a perineum or Pitocin to stop a hemorrhage, all that was illegal. And I wanted to make sure that I not only fixed the legal problem, but I made all those things options for midwives to use if they chose. My third goal was I wanted direct entry midwives to be able to open birth centers and run their own birth centers, not have to work for someone else, but to be able to have a birth center and allow that option for women. My fourth was I wanted midwives to be able to license those birth centers. That came along a little later because I didn't realize what licensure would mean. And I don't know how many of you know that when the Affordable Care Act was passed, there's a little piece of the Social Security Act that says that certified professional midwives must be reimbursed under Medicaid if they are licensed. The midwife is licensed and she's practicing, or not if she's like, yeah, she has to be licensed and the birth center has to be licensed. Well, the laws were such that we couldn't get licenses for birth centers. Even though we could have them, we conquered that goal, but we couldn't license them. And so that was a major roadblock for Medicaid, which was the next of my goals. I really feel like midwives should be reimbursed with insurance and Medicaid. Midwives may not choose to be paid that way. That's perfectly fine with me. I have no interest in dictating to other midwives how they need to practice or how they should run their business. But I really felt like we were providing a legitimate service that it was in the interests of insurance companies and Medicaid to pay for. And really we should be. The next one was I wanted to improve interprofessional cooperation. When I first started, you'd get doctors saying talk to the hand when you took somebody in for a transfer. One of my midwives who worked for me had a doctor threaten to run her down with this truck in the parking lot. It was oftentimes extremely hostile. And I just did not understand why it was that way, but it clearly was. So one of the things I wanted to do was maybe not get full acceptance. I know there's physicians out there that won't fully accept us as valid and competent providers, but I wanted to make some headway in what we had. The next thing was I wanted to create a model of practice where midwives didn't have to sacrifice the way that they commonly do. I didn't want a midwife to have to be on call 24/7, 365, sacrificing whatever she had to for her family or anything else because a client was calling. I just felt like that was too much to ask of anyone. And so I wanted to create a model of practice where you didn't have to do that. I felt like new midwives, you kind of learn and you have your mentors and you feel all safe and happy. And you get your piece of paper now that you can get a piece of paper. And you start your practice and suddenly you're in the big, wide, lonely grass. And you just feel like, oh, what have I done? Do I know anything at all? Brand new midwives are very, very unsupportive. And your bad outcomes are most likely to happen in those very first years, and that's what gets a lot of midwives out of the profession. I wanted to create a model of practice where new midwives could be nurtured through that insecure period and become very strong and competent midwives who then turn and train others. And I wanted midwives to be able to make a living at being a midwife. Many midwives don't need or want to make a living, or at least they didn't when I started. That's really changing a lot. I wanted midwives to have some sort of model of business where they could actually live on what they earn as a midwife. And then I wanted to solve the problem of childcare. This is the one I actually made zero progress at. And that was the childcare issue. Most midwives get into midwifery in their childbearing years and they're having little babies. And it's very difficult to be a midwife when you have little babies. And I wanted to solve that somehow. The last thing I wanted to do, number 8, was I wanted to create a model of apprenticeship for student midwives so that they weren't so awfully abused as they often are by preceptors, and so that they could fit apprenticeship into their life. What I was hearing was, I need to come and work with someone for 3 weeks, and I need to catch a lot of babies in that time, because then I have to go back to my husband, my job, my family, whatever it is. And I can't just live at the beck and call of a senior midwife, you know, and sacrifice my family once again. So those were all things that were major goals for me. And I think the next question is supposed to answer those change, so I'll do that.
Your turn, Kristi?
Yeah, I just have to say, I think she's accomplished almost all of those goals. Maybe she'll talk more about that. Pretty amazing. My legacy for Utah, and I think anywhere that I have been, is to, I think my first love is education. I love being an educator. I love giving people the opportunity to be educated. And missing that, I felt like I had a lot of great education as a student midwife, but it didn't have that, you know, that structure, and I wasn't really sure of what my gaps were. So whether I'm talking to a new parent in a childbirth education class, or training a doula, or training a midwife, my legacy is, I hope that I have planted a seed for a lifelong desire to learn. And whether it's a structured school that you're attending, or you're doing a PEP process, just that thirst to continue to learn. And I see a lot of you here today that, you know, that seed was initially planted, and you're still learning, you're still growing, and you're becoming, you know, that next level of whatever it is you want to be. So I hope that I have awakened an innate nature in every single person that I come into contact with, to continue that lifelong journey of learning and education. And then to turn around and be that mentor, that educator for somebody else. Because that's the only way we're going to keep this going. And to do it in a way that isn't bullying, to do it in a way that is supportive, and that gives us, when we first step out, whether it be a new mother or parent, or we first step out as a new doula, or we first step out as a new midwife, there's a lack of confidence in all of those roles. So who is it that's going to midwife us through that? Who's going to be our mentor? And so the other legacy, I hope, is to set an example of mentorship, so that you all mentor one another, and there are safety nets for what you need until you have that confidence to fly away on your own. I remember Heather Whitley, who's a midwife here, she said, I felt like I had such a great education at the Midwives College of Utah, but when I was thrust out that first year of practice on my own, I was terrified when I realized some of the gaps in my learning. And it took 2 or 3 years before I felt like I had the confidence to really, I mean, it was that imposter syndrome, right, for a while. And so what do we do to support that? And how do we continue to plant that seed of love of learning and mentorship in one another, so we can keep growing this profession? That, I hope, is my legacy.
You have more time, but that's all.
What's your legacy as a doula?
I don't know, I guess I've trained over 2,500 doulas, and so there's a lot of people out there, whether they become doulas or not, they start talking to their family members, their grandchildren, their sisters, their cousins, and changing just the culture of birth in our country. We have a crisis in this country, and I'm trying to do something to change the culture of birth and reduce the fear around birth, reduce the lack of control in the decision-making process that people have when they're birthing. And I think every single doula that ever gets trained, or every single midwife that ever gets trained, whether they go on to do 1 million births themselves or do only 1 birth, they actually start changing the culture of the people around them. So I think just by sheer numbers, that starts shifting the culture.
Well, I'd just like to say that you ladies have been very significant for this day. I mean,
have
really,
too,
let's face it. I'm just an old lady at this point. But anyway, I think that my purpose was just to get midwives out there. In other words, I can only do so many births, okay? But every time a new midwife goes out there, she forms her own clientele. She influences people, they go to her. And so to me, that was the most important thing for actually influencing birth in this generation and the next generation and the next generation is having midwives to be out there and helping people. And yeah, I guess that was my intent and why I started the school. I think I was meant to train midwives, but I'm just so excited about how things have grown and developed in this state. Just wonderful with all the people that have helped and stepped in and done this or that or whatever. It's just been phenomenal. I think Utah has one of the best systems in the United States, okay? And it definitely has the best laws.
The next question is, what are the changes in midwifery you've seen over the course of your career? What of those changes were positive and what of those changes maybe?
Want me to start? Sure. So you might recall I said I didn't even know about Diane's school, and there were a lot of factions. You know, we had the Utah County Midwives, the Salt Lake County Midwives, and there really was that kind of infighting going on when I was first a midwife, and first a student, I should say. And what I've seen change over the years that is most thrilling to me is this unity. Even when we were having all of the back and forth about should we license, should we be should we remain unlicensed, should we have optional licensing, there is still, you know, differences of opinion, but now we come together in the same spaces. Sherry Long, who was a midwife from Oregon, and I started the Utah Midwives organization. I think it had been started, then it died, and we were asking, why isn't there a group of midwives? And everybody said, well, they were just all fighting too much. So we kind of revived that and started bringing midwives together in the same space and talking about our difficult issues. I remember Marla Bothwell was a big part of that. And so now here we sit in a room with students who are doing the PEP process, students who are involved in a MEC accredited school, people who are thinking about becoming CNMs, et cetera, et cetera. And we sit in hewing meetings where we're working on quality control and how to do good, safe transports. We're talking to the Department of Health. I mean, it's incredible the number of people that are working together to support midwifery and to hopefully take care of the maternity care crisis that we have in the United States. It's pretty incredible. And we really do, like Diane and Suzanne said, we really do have, I think, one of the best states for options. We have a lot more midwives and a lot more doulas than a lot of states do. We even still have places people can go to have hospital birth, which they can't do in a lot of countries. We have, or in a lot of counties, we have a lot of maternity care deserts throughout the United States. Not really as big of a problem in Utah as it is in many other states.
Can you explain?
What that means is you have to drive 4 or 5 hours to have anybody to take care of you for your prenatal care, your birth, and your postpartum care. And we do have a little bit of that in the rural areas in Utah, but even in the rural areas of Utah, we have some practicing midwives. I mean, Hugh down doing Bluebell, and we have a lot going on in southern Utah. So we really are blessed with many options. And that to me is one of the things I've seen change over the years. We're no longer hiding that we're midwives. We're no longer practicing illegally. And we have that optional licensing, which is, you know, gives us kind of the best of both worlds in a lot of ways, as long as we can protect it and keep it safe. And we have to do that by having good standards of practice and peer reviews and, you know, being safe in all the ways that we practice midwifery. So I love that we have so many options because, gosh, when I looked for a home birth midwife, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. It's no longer the case. Victoria,
I've had an interesting experience really in the Ridgefield Reaper and the library and seeing my little neighborhood girl, Dixie Shaheen Rasmussen, and her picture being a midwife. And I thought, How neat. She was just a little girl in the neighborhood.
Right. So I love all the options that we have. Big change.
So I just am blown away. I've been a midwife for 25 years. Nothing compared to that. I give you my homage. But in that 25 years, things have happened that I never thought I would see in my life. The licensure that we have, every single midwife can practice legally now and do what she needs to do. And you can do that with so much flexibility, like you said. Boy, I didn't think that would ever happen. Well, we got all the birth center stuff straightened out. There are like 18, 19 birth centers owned and run by direct entry midwives, licensed and unlicensed. So the one that I think has made the hugest difference is hewing, which you mentioned earlier. Hewing is the Utah Women and Newborns Quality Collaborative. And I have to give kudos to Erin Clark, who is a perinatologist at the University of Utah. She chairs the subcommittee on out-of-hospital birth. Hewing, the out-of-hospital birth subcommittee, is a collaborative of all different kinds of perinatal professionals. We have perinatologists like Erin, we have obstetricians, we have nurse midwives, we have direct entry midwives. You know, we just have doulas now. We have everyone who possibly wants a voice in the world of maternal and newborn care can come and sit at the table and try to solve problems with us. And we have developed all of these tools, particularly around transfer. Transfer, as I mentioned earlier, used to be horrible, terrifying. And now we go in, we have forms, people know what to expect of us. If you go out on how many you know this, if you transfer to a certain hospital, there's a pretty good likelihood that that hospital has posted online their guidelines for how you should transfer into them. Who do you call? Where do you present yourself? You know, who do you talk to? What are their policies about people being in the room for this, that, and the other thing? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff about how to transfer to that hospital. I never dreamed that such a thing could happen. When I used to talk to students from other states, they would just go, wow, really? And they'd all want to try to start it. And I'm like, you can do it. All you have to do is get enough people together who really want to. So to me, from the time I started my practice to the time I quit last November, it's just unbelievable how much change there is. It is so much better. I don't see anything that's negative in that time. And maybe I just look through rose-colored glasses, but to me, the positive surely overwhelms any negative thing.
All right. Well, I happen to agree with everything you ladies have said. I think maybe I just want to tell you a funny little story, okay? Historically, okay, about the time and licensure, okay? I personally believe in buyer beware, okay? And I'm not a big licensure fan. And I happen to be a natural oriented midwife, okay? And I had the atmosphere in the state when the topic of licensure first started coming up was not good. We would have gotten absolutely zapped out, okay? So I was very much against that. But I have to say that when Suzanne started to go for licensure, it was the golden time. You just had the right people in the legislature. I mean, it was just perfect. And I thought about this for a while. And looking at the midwives that were practicing in the state of Utah at that time, practically 95% of them were carrying PIT. Now, I was not carrying PIT. I did 1,000 births without Pitocin, carrying Pitocin, okay? But I looked at the profession and I thought, you know, this just isn't right. if they're carrying PIT, they ought to be licensed, okay? And then I thought, you know, wouldn't it be wonderful to have birthing centers? Because we need birthing centers for women who are not quite ready for home birth, but something in between. And I thought, man, that would really be wonderful. Well, I was talking to one of the gals that I trained as a midwife, and we were discussing these issues, okay? And we were talking about, there was a big poll, you know, if you, you know, you're discrediting the historical midwifery scene and all these historical midwives if you go for licensing and births and so forth. And I was talking to her and she said, well, Dianne, don't you think that Patty Sessions, who was the premier Mormon midwife, if she was practicing today, I bet you $10 she'd have Pitocin in her bag. And I laughed and laughed and laughed. I went home and got in my bathtub with my warm water and I laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. I thought, sure, that's it. That's great.
Can I say one more thing? Sorry. I don't know if it's really commonly known how the licensure effort came about. I mean, I had thought about it for a long time. I always told God I had no interest in being involved, and please don't call me to that. It didn't work out that well, but it started because I was the president of the Utah Midwives Association, and we had a midwife get arrested.
In fact, Liz Smith was going to be here with us tonight, but she has a birth. So
Yeah.
Liz couldn't be here.
So poor Liz got to be the sacrificial lamb for all the rest of us. She was charged with 4 felony counts of practicing medicine without a license. She did not have a bad outcome. No family, I mean, none of the mothers she served complained, but there was some other relative who was at one of her births that got to be in her bonnet and filed a report with DOPL, and that's how the whole thing started. And she was facing 20 years in prison for being a good midwife, for practicing safely, although illegally. It was illegal, we cannot argue that.
Yeah, we were illegal.
We were illegal, but she didn't have a bad act. She wasn't killing mothers and babies. She was doing what we all were doing and hoping we didn't get caught. And, you know, 20 years in prison, that's a lot to pay for your cause. And that's what started it. And now I'm so happy we don't have to face that.
And what was her outcome?
Yeah.
Oh, she ended up pleading and she got, I think it was 18 months probation. And she had to do some special paperwork. When we finally got licensure and she applied for a license, we had to do some paperwork, but there were really good people at DOPL at that time, and you know, they made sure that it happened. And it all turned out well. And she's still practicing to this day.
Yeah. In St. George, Southern Utah.
Can you describe, and this is not in the list here, but I can get Fritzwell here. Can you describe what the challenges were in licensure? And how you came to the conclusion of the kind of license that Utah has now.
Which is the only state that has optional
Yes.
licensing, by the way.
It left.
Left.
The
Oregon
only
just
state
left.
left.
A few years ago, and now Utah's the only state left with
With
optional
voluntary licensure. Yeah, you know, it was very, very, very polarizing. I think Diane mentioned that. There were many midwives who were flat out against it, heart and soul, religious level belief that this was bad and wrong and horrible. And then there were equally on the other side, midwives who really believed in it and wanted to seize the opportunity. And I, for many years, really was pained over the dissent that it caused in the community. It was really ugly and nasty. It took us 5 years to get it through, and a big reason for that is that we were not united as midwives. We would go up to the legislature, you know, and there would be these, hell no, licensure midwives, and there's hell yes, licensure midwives. And the legislators are going, would you just get yourselves together and tell us what you actually want, because we're confused. So that was very difficult.
Which is still a problem in the entire United States.
Yeah, every state that attempts licensure has this issue.
And the CNMs versus
CNMs,
non-CNMs, and yeah, we all need to get our shit together.
Yeah.
What decade are you talking about? When did this
So
happen?
our bill actually passed in 2005. So we started our effort in 2000. We went 5 times to the legislature. 2005, it finally passed in the last 5 minutes of the legislature by 1 vote. Yes, ma'am.
Suzanne, or any of you, I know that this is being recorded, and without necessarily saying, you know, who was on what side or who was on the other side, and you mentioned Marla Bothwell, who's my co-director, but who were the women that were instrumental, since we're recording this for posterity's sake, who were like the group of the cronies that were kind of putting this all together?
So there was an initial, once we had this vote, which ended up passing, which gave us the authority for the organization to go ahead and seek licensure. We put together a group of 5 midwives to be on this committee to make it happen. Dianne was one of those people, absolutely instrumental. I was one. Holly Richardson, if any of you know her, she's not really practicing much right now, but she went on to become a legislator herself. Heather
Which
Johnson.
she says is because of all that.
Yeah, all of her. She loved it so much. She just didn't have it. I had the opposite reaction. I would like never do it. So, Heather Johnston is another one. And then Susan Padilla, who's no longer in the state. But we kind of selected this committee to try and represent the different groups that we perceived would have a different viewpoint. Dianne is a person that we selected because we felt like she could really reach out to the traditional midwives who were, in majority of whom were very anti-licensure, and that they would trust her to talk to us and represent their point of view. And I think that you served that role incredibly well. Because Dianne was on the committee, she was able to say, okay, look, you know, we just can't make all these people illegal. And we're like, well, yeah, we don't want to. So, you know, it was very balanced. Susan was a nurse and Holly was a nurse, although she was really more midwife than nurse at that time. But so we felt like we had a point of view of what the medical community would be looking for in licensing us. You know, we just, to be perfectly honest, I felt that we were called. We were called to do what we did, when we did it, the way we did it. And we had so many experiences along the way that confirmed that for us. You know, our history of who would and wouldn't sponsor the bill, solving different problems. We just felt like the hand of God was in the whole thing. And even when we had these serious divisions among the midwives, which were heartbreaking, I always just had this feeling that when it was all said and done and the dust had settled, we would come back together because the world was going to be a better place. And I feel, I mean, other people will have to opine, but I really feel like that's what happened. I don't even remember sometimes who was on one side and who was on the other. We're all just midwives now. And
Who was the one vote? You said it was.
Well, it was the president of the Senate, because it went to the Senate second, and when the vote is even on both sides, the president of the Senate will cast the deciding vote. And so it was John Valentine who cast that deciding vote. I think it was 10 minutes or 5 minutes to midnight. We weren't even sure.
Wife is a doula.
What?
It helps that his wife was a doula instructor.
Yeah, well, he's an EMT instructor, so he kind of had his own perspective on it. But really, it's just like Dianne said, everybody who was there at that time had a role to play in this incredible orchestration that turned out to be licensure. Even the people at Doppel and everybody. It was amazing. I would have to say it's one of the most spiritual experiences that I've ever had.
There's a couple things that I'd like to just mention about this, okay? One, I think that my role on the committee was to work really hard to make it so that we could have unlicensed midwives. And but the legislature at that time had a bunch of anti-licensure guys in it, and they're gone now. Okay, and so it was a perfect timing. In other words, the timing was perfect. But one other thing, one of my main concerns was, you know, the certified nurse midwives at that time had to work under a physician. And so the Utah Medical Association, of course, got into the play and interest in this bill. And I have to say, I was so impressed when we would go into a meeting and Suzanne and Holly would work with them. But this was what happened. In other words, they convinced the doctors that they didn't, if we transported someone in, that they didn't need to be responsible for what we had done, but only for what they did afterwards. And they didn't want to be over us, that we had to work under them, because then they would be responsible for our actions, okay? And that was absolutely perfect and got us so that we could be independent practitioners. And as I say, genius, okay?
I give the credit somewhere else.
And
there were so many things like that.
Yeah, it just, time and time again.
I'll add one piece that I think is an important lesson I learned just not being on the committee and being a kind of a bridge between listening to people talk about why they didn't want licensure versus why they did. And I was very pro-licensure, but I could still kind of be that bridge. What I noticed about this group of 5 people is they never, at least as far as I could observe, got involved in the drama. They kind of kept their heads down for those 5 years, and I think it was 5 years, right? 5 years, and oftentimes when I would talk to especially Heather or Suzanne, they would have information that was evidence-based about why, you know, what the information was that they were presenting to the legislators, but I don't recall a time that they got involved in all the drama that was going on with the rest of us. And I think if you have some leadership going forward, it's really important to remember that. I mean, it just seemed like you were sequestered with your heads down, working very, very hard. And I remember I told Holly Richardson that observation, and she was a little more involved in some of the drama, but she said, yeah, really, we feel like there is divine intervention. She used those words, and we feel like we know that this is the right thing to be doing, and we know why we're doing it. And so they never lost sight of that vision, even though it was a very long time.
It was very long, and along those lines, it was so important that our hearts were right. We had legislators who just sort of look at us and go, I don't get it. Because most of the time when a profession is looking to first license, the goal is to cut out your competition. Like, how many people can we get not qualified for licensure so we can be the only ones and get all the customers? You know, like that's very common in the world of new licensures. And they would talk to us and we're like, no, we're really serious about this voluntary licensure thing. We are not trying to put half the midwives in the state out of business. We want to protect everyone. We want to give everyone choices. We want to have mothers have choices, midwives have choices, and everybody has as many choices as possible. That's all we're trying to protect. We're not trying to protect our turf. And that was very strongly ingrained in all 5 of us from the time we started until the time we finished. And even though I think a lot of people, you know, who were working to opposing licensure maybe didn't know that or didn't see that, I hope that it's really become evident now that we were never out to screw anybody. We really just wanted to make it better. And I think if we'd not had that attitude, we would not have been successful.
Well, we have,
0 time.
That was a great slide
that's
track.
really beautiful.
That's what
Is
we
there
need.
anyone, does anyone have a burning question that
I
you'd like
do.
to ask the panel before we end?
I have a burning question. So the laws that are now in place, was it the 5 of you that wrote those, or that kind of decided what
Yes.
could be legal and what we could carry and like what we can attend as licensed?
Yes, we drafted another divine intervention. They have they have an office at the Hill called the Office of Legislative Research, and they're the ones who draft bills. So normally you go to them, you say, this is what we want. An attorney working for the state drafts it. For some reason, the guy who worked with us, we said, here's our draft. We worked for months and months and months in all the other states and figuring out exactly what we wanted and how could we get it and how could we argue for it. And we drafted the whole thing. And we gave it to the attorney at the state, and he said, looks good. Let me know when you want changes. And every time we'd want to make a change, he would just do it for us. And I have never experienced that in other projects I've been involved in at the Hill. Just, again, total divine intervention. Somehow we were meant to do this and do it the way that we did it. I think God loves midwives. Wanted to help us.
Yeah,
That's true.
I take part in that scripture all the time.
Any other burning questions?
I just wanted to say thank you for all the work that you did with the legislature, for all the future midwives in Utah, because that was extremely important. And I'm just thinking you were the ones that had to do that, and I'm so grateful that I don't like the new generation's not having to do that. And also, thank you for allowing there to be the option of the licensed and non-licensed midwives, because there are so many midwives that aren't licensed that are incredible midwives, and it doesn't necessarily speak to anyone's skill level,
Right.
how they are as a midwife. And then there are some laws that I would like to see changed in the future, such as I want to be licensed, but I'm going to lose the option of being able to do breech and other things like that. So I myself would like to see that changed in the future. I'm just wondering if there's anything else that you would like to see changed in the future as well with different laws in Utah.
Not particularly for me.
Yeah, mainly.
The breeches and twins thing, we actually were able to do breeches and twins until it was 1 or 2 years after our licensure bill passed. We had a very hostile legislator who tried to amend our statute, had a bill to basically restrict us down to no one as a client. And so in order to fend off that attack, we really could not argue with the data and the safety to preserve breeches and twins. And so we sort of on purpose said, okay, we can't win the breeches and twins fight anyway, so we'll give up breeches and twins in order to keep VBACs. Because VBACs are much more numerous, much easier to defend, doing much better data. And so that's how we lost them. If you want to try to go back and get it, good luck to you. It's a long, hard slog, and that one in particular is a difficult one. But I mean, I'm happy to tell you everything I know. I'm sure your mom could tell you a ton if she hasn't already.
Okay, yeah, because I just find it interesting, because if I'm on a birth with my mom, it's a twin, she can't catch, but I can catch, and it can be, but I'm like, she's more qualified than I ever am to deliver. So it's just, something I have in mind maybe in the future, hopefully.
That was part of why we supported the voluntary licensure, because we envisioned that midwives would pair up so that they could cover as many possible combinations and still be able to provide good legal care.
Can I say one national thing? So there are still, 22 states, 27 states where midwifery is illegal. They're in that boat we were in. And so hopefully if you're from Colorado Nebraska. Nebraska, and I can tell you
They're still fighting.
a lot of passion about this. So just know that we are also at a pivotal point in the United States, because the American Medical Association, ACOG, CNMs are all very supportive of midwifery on the national level and realize because of this crisis that I keep referring to that we've got to do something. There are important, there's important national work that took place 7 years ago with an organization called USMIRA, where all of those organizations came together and said, we will support midwifery in any state in which legislation still needs to come about, licensure still needs to come about with this criteria. Now you might not be thrilled about the criteria. Most of the bills that have been successful in the last few years do require that midwives have graduated from a MEC accredited school. But just like Suzanne just said with the licensure, you kind of have to come to a compromise. But what happened with that work we did on the USMIRA level, on the US or the national level with USMIRA is that finally the CNMs, ACOG and AMA said, we'll step back. We'll step back as long as you have this. Because, you know, we do, in the US, we're difficult to understand. I mean, what's the credibility? What's the education? How can we determine what your education is with the CPM? And so that was the compromise. And even there's something in the CPM called a bridging program. And there is some rumor going around that everybody has to have graduated from a MEC accredited school by 2020. That is false. That was just the goal that we set because we were told by ACOG there will be a crisis in 2020. We will be short 20,000 care providers in the US. That happened before 2020. It's already a fact. And so the nice thing is that, for example, USMIRA has a legislative toolkit with all the same kind of tools that Suzanne and Holly and everybody would have wished they had had, that now has the support of those national organizations. And it doesn't always happen on a state grassroots level. Sometimes the state has to call the national and say to the CNM organization, hey, get your people in the state to back up what you said they'd back up. But it's happening. The last 4 states that have passed licensure laws have really good laws that they feel good about for the most part. And they did it with the work from the national level that's been going on with those organizations finally coming together and realizing we've got to do something about this crisis. So,
and just to tell you,
it's supportive.
What an advance that is. Mm-hmm. When we first sat down at our meeting with the Utah Medical Association, we sat at this table not far from here, and they said, and I quote, we will squash you like bugs. And it turned out not to be the case, but boy, they tried. So to have them now saying, okay, not only will we not fight, but we will actually support to some degree these licensure laws, that is a huge step forward. Huge.
How did that happen? How did that happen?
From all of us coming together on a national level about 7 years ago and creating this agreement. If you have these parameters, then we can agree. And the states that have used the legislative toolkit have been pretty successful. So
we probably didn't take them 5 years.
No, a couple.
All the gray hair.
So there's some good research out there now too that's
that we didn't
very
have
favorable for out of hospital birth.
We didn't have that before either. So we have good data and a huge need in the US.
So I hope one thing that you're discovering is that your opportunities for being trained as a midwife don't end in your preceptorship. That there's some incredible opportunity for mentoring and training and coaching that extends development for leadership and vision that extends beyond just what happens in your practice during labor. And the resources we have in Utah are unique and incredible. Our human midwife resources are amazing. So I hope that you all hold that dear and hold that as a treasure. The other thing that I'd like to share with you is Utah is the last state in the country that has voluntary licensure. And all other states that had voluntary licensure have let that go for various reasons of protectionism and worry about community and training. But Utah has one of the most incredible models of midwifery that allows for a broad spectrum of care. And so the Utah Midwives organization has recently recommitted itself to supporting and sustaining and protecting Utah's unique law of voluntary licensure. But in order to do that, it requires the same kind of historical community and outwardness of seeing everyone at the table, caring about them, investing, valuing them. That's what it will require. And so I'm really encouraging you that if you care about what Utah has as a model to share with other states and to preserve the unique thing that we have, not only our laws, not only the licensure, but also our unique community, that you consider joining them and being part of that community to support what has historically, a historic healing, really, and to continue that with the student arm, to really, in a conscious way, develop your community on purpose. How do you want it to be as you practice together? Building your own community as a midwife, as students, and leaving that legacy for the students that come. So I'm going to let Anna talk a little bit more about that, but before I end, I want to remind you that if you want to purchase any of Victoria's books, which, by the way, this is probably the last place that you can get them unless you're really searching through bookstores to get them. So if you want to purchase them here and have them signed by Victoria, you're welcome to use PayPal or Venmo. And just the information is there. Just make a note of what you're purchasing and we'll get that money.
And I take cash.
And she also does cash. And if you are interested in joining the UMO as a student or a friend or a midwife, you are not yet a member, you can also do that and we can support you. Very quick registration.
Thank you, everyone. Awesome. Can I get you to sit there the whole time? If you want to, we can sit, please.
I like your spotlight. It takes a little pressure off people. Okay.
Can you
So,
be seen now?
yeah, if I'm
Yeah, she
right
can. No,
here,
you're good. You're plenty in it.
Who didn't pick up one of these yet? Okay. So,
I just put this together really quick this morning. I'm sorry it's not more edited.
It looks
Can you pass me back to her? All right, so give me something to look at.
okay. So, here's the deal. We've got this UMO-Student Arm because I saw that the students aren't really as involved as they could be. And I think we could be useful to the midwife community, and they could be useful to us, and we could be useful to each other. And I don't want anyone to have to reinvent the wheel and start their practice with no support and feel like the worst thing is this thought: I'm competition for my preceptors. That's a horrible thought. It shouldn't be that way. It really shouldn't. So I feel like this is kind of my vision, you guys. Who was I talking to? Dianne Gordon. She said, don't talk to me about pie. This is not a pie. This is a faucet. And we are just, I feel like we're climbing up this hill and we're almost to this tipping point where we're going to have more people who want midwives than we have midwives to serve them. And we need to keep that vision in our minds and collaborate and get the word out to them. There are so many ways we could do that, but we can't do it alone. We need to do it together. So I feel like we can be the change we wish to see in the midwifery community. And I created these 4 committees. And this can only, like, if I only have 2 people in my organization, we'll just do 1 committee, right? If I have 20 people in my organization, then I have 2 leadership roles in every committee. Leadership means you get to put more time, effort, and service in. So I really see it like,
Thanks for being straight with us on that.
right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I deliberately made it so that there are 4 equal sized things here, okay? These committees, there's not one above another. They all serve different purposes. And hopefully everyone will take some time to volunteer in different roles as they're able in their career or during their student time. I found myself in this strange place where all my schoolwork was done and I'm like waiting for women to have babies so that I can finish my clinical placement. And I'm starting my practice and I'm like, okay, this is the time to build foundations and set things up. So this is one of the things I'm setting up because I need this. So I'm creating what I need and I'm thinking I'm not the only student. that might need a little support and help and wouldn't, you know. So let me go over these different committees. The mentoring committee, I would like to see us create a peer support network where students who are farther along can be available to talk to students who aren't as far along. And it does kind of work like a pyramid. A lot more people get in than finish, right? So, but give those people someone to talk to, give them some direction. And one of the things we want to do is make a hub for students to find preceptors and for preceptors to find students. This really shouldn't be that hard. We have the internet. So, but someone needs to do it, right? We want to plan to have a quarterly presentation from a midwife, like these lovely ladies here. It can be online. I mean, I want to plan in-person stuff, but I know that everybody can't come every time. And so we can make some things be online or available for people and get some mentoring from these ladies. I know I really appreciate my time with Suzanne, and any time that I have felt like, oh my gosh, what do people think of me? Channel Suzanne. And I think Suzanne doesn't care. You're so right. You've been so successful at making a difference, and I realize it doesn't matter what everyone else thinks of me. It matters what I feel like I'm supposed to do, and that I do it. So I'm kind of like putting myself out there as like this person that is not polished, and I feel inadequate, and I have imposter syndrome as bad as anybody. But I figure if I look like an idiot, maybe the rest of you will feel more comfortable. Like, hey, I can do better than that. Like Diane, when she went to that conference, and she was like, well, I know more than these ladies do. I guess I could catch babies. Okay. Anyway, I'd like to also see us do this. I've never been, you guys, in all my time as a student, I've never been to a peer review. What's up with that? Why don't we have student peer review? I think that there's probably a legal, safe, HIPAA compliant way that we can get together and talk about our experiences. And if you're ever in a placement or you're having trouble with a preceptor, it's nice to be able to talk to someone else and find out what's normal and what's not and how to get help. And when I say get help, I don't mean get someone in trouble. I mean, learn how to navigate the complex relationships that we're going to continue to have because the preceptor doesn't just disappear unless you murder them.
And then you have bigger problems.
I'm pretty sure that really is illegal.
That's not changing.
There's some laws we're not going to try to change. Okay, so coordination. That's kind of what I've been doing with Jodi, where I've learned in my time serving in the MCU Student Council this year, somebody has to make an agenda, set a meeting time, take notes, and keep it going. Somebody has to check in with other committees and say, so how's that going? Do you need support? Just to keep balls rolling. We need deadlines. We need to keep things happening. I love that you have those 8 goals. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna make my goals. I told Jodi once, I'm like, I think maybe I'm just bipolar and there's all these things I want to do and I know I can't do them all. And she said, Anna, you're at the beginning of your career. You actually maybe could do them all. So I'm like,
not all at once.
Right. So just like it, all right, that one's for later. Okay. So coordination is, I see it honestly as kind of a burdensome job. It's what might at one time have been called president. I just really don't like having to have a president. Unless you really need a figurehead to speak for everybody, and I don't think we do in this organization. Okay, collaboration. This is the one that gets me so excited because I have a business that I launched last spring, and every time I think about advertising and marketing, I just feel like it would be so much more effective to put that energy behind a group of people. Now, I might not be able to convince the midwifery community yet to do that, but maybe I could get some students to work with, and we can get the word out there about midwives. So my little slogan is, any midwives advertising is every midwives advertising. And every midwives advertising is any midwives advertising. Because people actually don't know about us. We swim in this midwife water and we think that people just aren't choosing us. But I remember working at Beautiful Mountain and this woman walking into the birth center and she said, I didn't know we had midwives in Utah. Can I make an appointment for my daughter next week?
Like 10 of those, please.
Yeah. There's some people that don't know, or they do know, but they are misinformed. There's a lot of misinformation.
Yeah, I found out about Homebirth on a chat room baby center group.
That's an option, right?
No, I thought it was crazy. I was like, why would you ever do that? And I went to a week, so I was like, baby, which I found out was this particular baby was not a great experience, but I had no idea until I was in my 20s, and I feel like that was poor time to find out so late. So I totally agree with you because, you know, even sometimes when people come into our center and maybe we're not the best fit, I say, hey, like, try this person or try this because they might fit with you better. You know, I'm not upset that you're not going to birth with us, but I still want you to go try and find a hospital somewhere.
And it's good business to talk up midwives and to never ever say anything negative about anyone you know. Because Kristi gave this amazing paper. I hope I'm not taking too much time, but it changed my life with this paper. It was about horizontal violence. And I'm sure you know all about it from living in Utah, but I see it everywhere. And I see it just among women. When somebody's child, you know, dies in a car or something, and everybody jumps on them. Okay, last year, the day after my family moved here, I was busy working, and one of my kids, who was technically being watched by 4 qualified people, went to the park with some siblings and then got left there. And the police were so generous as to post it on Facebook and say, whose kid is this? Like, they were actually trying to use that. Okay, do not read the comments. I knew better. Do not read the comments. But it was hard, you guys, like, to have that kind of negative energy. Anyway, it's just horizontal violence. It exists in any marginalized community. And okay, forgive me for getting political here, but I have learned that anybody can feel marginalized. And Donald Trump is proof of that. Even he feels sorry for himself and picked on sometimes. And you can't get more privileged than President of the United States, super wealthy and white. I'm just like, any of us can feel like I'm being discriminated against. So, not saying anything pro or con, just, I think that, well, anyway, I could talk about that topic more, and I do all the time.
Maybe you should do one of these presentations. Yeah. It sounds like an interesting conversation.
I just think it's just important for us to realize that if we're feeling like a victim, there's something in our heart and our thinking that we can address and we can own and we can take responsibility for and shift. So, okay, community. Coordinates service opportunities within the UMO, organizes these events. Someone else, please do this. And organizes educational campaigns. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. What if we had a showing at farmers markets where we just advertise what midwives do? Not advertising my business, but just advertising what midwives do. Where you can come and ask questions. Where you can get in contact with the UMO, who then has a list of midwives. However we want to do that. But one person can't do that. That's just too much. I mean, for one thing, even if I did it, I couldn't hit all the farmers markets. And it'd be nice to hit all of them at least once. There's just so many things we could do together. So that's why I put we need you. The organization will function with you without you, but it will be a lot cooler with more people. So if you can, please join. If you can't like actually join the UMO, please get on the Facebook page still and stay there. We're not like opposed to help from people that haven't paid their dues. We get the money thing. So please join us and please share all over your social media when we do stuff. And let's get the word out, because my goal, this is my goal, is that every student midwife in Utah can make an informed decision about whether to join us or not. If they don't know we exist, then they're not choosing not to join us. They're not choosing to not have support. We have students who are very isolated. So we need to reach out. Anytime you hear about a student or aspiring midwives or doulas, that's another thing. Someday, after we get this going, I want to have there be like a little part for aspiring midwives, because think about the use we could make of people who want to dip their toes in, who might never go on, but want to get involved. Let them get as involved as they can without committing to 5 years of school and however tens of thousands of dollars and leaving their families. Involve them as much as they are willing and able to be involved. But we're not there yet. So, all right, I'll stop now. Thank you guys all for coming, and grab some food on your way out, because.
And if you'll fold your chair and put it against the wall. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank our